Well, I was going to record this on my GoPro, but 1, it doesn't have a viewfinder, 2, it's out of battery charge, and 3, it takes 4 to 6 hours for the damn thing to charge, and I'm not waiting. So, this is my synthesizer setup, and the cat, along with a Jasper or Wasp clone and an Arteria Micro Brute, plus an assortment of guitar pedals. Just about any guitar pedal I could want. I spent far too much time on DIY. The Wasp is a synthesizer from about the late 70s, with the cunning part being that it's just about entirely made of 4000 series CMOS chips rather than the usual audio amplifiers. It's got a couple of OTA op amps in there, but that's about it, apart from the headphone jack. And the touch keyboard is amazingly responsive. The filter is quite harsh and yet good sounding at the same time. The hold mod is extremely worthwhile. You can use it for a good drone that way, detune the second voice a bit. It has 2 oscillators, but it's monophonic. And overall it's just a nice little synthesizer. The Micro Brute is definitely a lead synth. I mean, it can do bass. With a bit of work it can probably do pad stuff, but it loves doing harsh leads. Crisp, responsive little micro keys. But if you want to know this, you can look up any other video on YouTube about it. So I'll move on. This is the clay sequencer developed on Electro Music by Scott Stites. It's quite unique in that most synthesizers, you step through the steps one at a time, but with the clay you can actually have more than one step active at the same time. Like now we've got both 1 and 4 going, so it's the 2 values from 1 and 4 added up and being spat out. Step. The 2 values at 2 and 5 being added together and spat out. Step. The 2 values at 3 and 6 being added together and spat out, and so on. It's also got a random in scaling on the output. Your octave, 2 octaves, that kind of carry on, along with a gate output along with these bus switches. Next to that, old Crow modular, the Suiseki phase shifter based on the old EHX Madstone. Cat, get out of that cord. Next to that, the Frequency Central System X envelope, extremely sharp and snappy like Rick says. The range switch goes between fast and slow overall. Next to that is the Sloth, and never has there been a better name for a module. It's on fast, and that LED will take about a minute to change. Now this next one I really have to explain together with the module next to it. The old Moog 960 sequencer is, well, along with the Buchla 100 series sequencer, it's the daddy. Start with the clock section. This is where the clock is generated internally. On is to set it going, off to stop it, and the 2 frequency knobs to speed it up or slow it down. Coarse and fine. You got your on and off, like I said, along with the gate in to set those externally. The control input to use the clock as your voltage controlled clock, basically from an external source. So an external source can control the speed. Oscillator output, which is basically the clock out for it. And shift, which shifts things along one step, along with the gate in, so you can clock it from an external source too. And each stage has 3 voltage outputs. These 1, 2, 3, which go along to the output here, where you can set the scaling and with 2 outputs. With each step you can either go along normal, stop, which means that the clock will stop when it hits that. So step, no, it can't step because it's stopped. Set to normal when it keeps going, stop, and it stops there. And skip, it'll skip that step entirely. Reset, it resets after that step. And you can jump to any stage in particular with these, or with the in jack, which will automatically jump to that step with an external gate source. The output jack puts a gate out whenever that stage is active, and if you take all those gate outs from each individual stage, you can use them on a trigger sequencer slaved to the 960. So as the sequencer steps through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on, the trigger bus will let you do 1. So left side is B, right side is A. They go out here. Merge is for either continuous, so if you have everything on, it'll just be do. If you turn merge off, it'll have a brief pause at the end of each step. Jürgen Heibel Living VCOs, 3 very nice sounding analog VCOs along with the driver, which will do vibrato, portamento, and has a little voltage controlled amplifier built into it, along with an octave switch for the shared voltage per octave input here. Each separate oscillator has a coarse and a fine tuning knob, track, which means that it's taking its frequency from the driver here, pulse width, which is the pulse width for the square output, linear detune, which is how detuned you want it compared to the other ones. PWM is a attenuator for the pulse width modulation input here, and you can get quite neat sounds using that. Voltage per octave input for if you just want to use this untracked, or if you want it to be slightly following something else as well as the shared input. Frequency modulation as well as saw, square, triangle and sine wave outputs. So there's 3 of those overall. Now if you've got 3 oscillators, obviously you want to mix them, which is why I've got a U-Synth mixer right next to it. It does what it says on the tin, 3 inputs, A, B, C, output and inverted output. You never know, you might want to use an inverted output. Next to that is the Catgill Synth Stomp Box interface. In attenuator send, send to your stomp box, return from your stomp box, go through a little amplifier and go back out to your modular. Next to that is a Biffaco Rampage, which is basically a surge dual universal slope generator. That's for that in cycle mode. Speed it up, slow it down. Insanely useful. It's basically, well, maths is a derivative of the surge as well, and there's been a lot of people cover this general type of module. Neutron sound orgone accumulator, wavetable VCO that can fade between 3 different sets. You can detune them. You can set a prime detune, although with the new firmware it's changed a bit and I honestly haven't wrapped my head around it. You can change the mode, frequency or not. Fix gets rid of all the weirdness, so it's just a simple oscillator. Turn that off. Frequency, this is for the frequency modulation, not for the actual oscillator itself. Index does weird stuff. Detune controls the amount of detuning you have when you turn the detune button on, so a little bit of detuning or a lot. Position is which of the 3 presets you want to use, and these are the coarse and fine tuning knobs. These blue ones are attenuators for the voltage controls for these 4 jokers. Usual voltage productive and gate input, main output, nice clean sounding sound, or nice is dependent on what you do with these, and a pulse width modulated output, which is very 8-bit or chip tuney. Elements, which is a DIY jobby of the mutable module. Modal synthesizer, physical modelling basically. Bow, blow and strike, where bow, stringed instruments like a violin or a cello, blow like a woodwind or a trumpet, and strike like a mallet or drums or what have you. And this side is a resonator with various resonator settings which can affect it very dramatically. The left LED here is the physical modelling happening, and the right side is the resonator. Have a look at DivKid's video for more details on that. Roll your own optodist, good for either distortion or really jacking up the gain on something. LED limiter for if you want a harsh square wave, and next to that is a frequency central wave runner, or LFO, with several different little waveforms on it. Frequency control, and it says distort, but that actually changes depending on what waveform you have. Like with square wave, it controls the pulse width modulation. You can run a sync input and it'll try and clock a tap tempo off it, which you can then use the multiplier to either get half of the tap tempo or some multiple of it instead. It's got an LFO out, which is dependent on the waveform you pick, or a clock out, which is purely dependent on your frequency. Next to that is the Thomas Henry quadrature function generator, coarse and fine control, 2 inputs with an attenuator on the envelope in, and the 4 phase outputs there. I suggest looking up another video if you want a good explanation of it, I'm afraid. Steiner Parker VCF from Synth. This has 4 modes: low pass, band pass, high pass and all pass. This thing screams. It is harsh and unforgiving if you're not careful. T-kick next to it from Bastel. I can't really say basically a bass drum because you can jack the resonance and it will go into really insane mode, or you can use the WTF input, insane again. Next to that is the Ornament in Crime, which again is an insanely deep module with several things you can queue up in it. I'm not going through them now, too many. Now the mixer